What's going on, everyone? I'm just a typical, average American here today to react and learn about how the BBC turned the tables on Trump. So, this is something that I totally forgot about, but Trump tried to sue the BBC, right? And I guess that's been dragged out for a while now, as lawsuits tend to do. And apparently, now the BBC is trying to turn the tables back on Trump. And to be honest, I'm not exactly sure what that means. So today, I really want to check out this video here by TLDR News and try to understand what exactly is going on here. So let's take a look.
Let's remind ourselves of how all of this started. In October 2024, Panorama, the BBC's long-running current affairs series, released an episode called Trump, A Second Chance, which investigated popular support for Trump's re-election. The documentary cut down 2 bits of a speech from Trump, which were spoken about an hour apart.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and I'll be there with you, and we fight. We fight like hell. And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
Oh my God. This, oh my God, yes. Like, isn't it amazing that here in the United States, so much crazy stuff has happened, including this. This is one of the most infamous days in modern American history. Like, every American remembers this. Whew. It wasn't that long ago, but a lot of us have already, we don't talk about this. We've kind of forgotten because so much crazy stuff has happened since this and still to this day with Donald Trump, in charge of our country. Like, it's amazing how, so much madness has ensued that, we don't even really talk about this. But yes, this is an infamous speech Donald Trump made where he was trying to pump up a crowd of his supporters or something, and then he had them march down to the US Capitol building where a full-blown riot ensued. People are climbing the walls, climbing over the fence, engaging with police officers, somebody died, and then people got inside the Capitol and were the government officials had to run away and hide. It's crazy. That's an actual thing that happened. I mean, there were people inside the Capitol building who broke in and wearing Viking helmets and stuff, in the name of the United States or something. It's embarrassing. Honestly, it's not good. It's insulting, really. They were like stomping on government property, where our representatives work, and the historical desks in the chamber of discussion. They were messing it up and stealing things. It's insulting. So yeah. What's been extremely controversial about all that is trying to determine exactly how much Donald Trump is to blame. Clearly, nobody will argue. I mean, nobody rational will argue that it was just a group of Donald Trump supporters breaking into the US Capitol government building, causing chaos and death. So that happened. That's a fact. And ever since, they've tried to determine how much Trump himself is to specifically blame for that incident. And I guess the BBC took his speech beforehand, which you could construe some of the things he said as encouraging this event to unfold. But they like took two of his different statements from that day and like combined them in possibly a deceptive way. And then Trump sued them for that, I think.
Then in November last year, The Telegraph leaked an internal BBC memo written by Michael Prescott, a journalist who at the time was serving as an external advisor to the BBC's Editorial Standards Committee. Among other complaints, the memo accused the BBC of misrepresenting Trump with this Panorama edit. These criticisms caught the public's attention and resulted in the BBC's Director General and Head of News resigning.
Wow, so they eventually had to resign over this. I mean, as much as I'm an American, and I am not a fan of Donald Trump and what he has done. I mean, it's crazy. And he is actively, in my opinion, responsible for the decline of the United States, the ruining our reputation, and so much pain and chaos for the U.S. and our allies. Yeah, to say the least of the things he has done. It would be difficult to encompass everything wrong with what has happened. But that being said, you shouldn't, especially as a news source, attempt to misconstrue exactly what he said or try to be deceptive. As a matter of fact, that's not necessary. Like, he already digs his own grave. He already says things that are so stupid and outrageous. You don't need to, stitch different statements together that were said at different times to try to make him look bad. I don't even think that's necessary. He already looks bad. So, unfortunately, doing stuff like this actually gave Donald Trump sort of a defense, like where he could try to actually look like a victim and be like, see, the news is misconstruing me. The news is misconstruing my right to speech and misrepresenting me. And none of you can trust the news. None of you can trust it. And that was a big message that helped get Donald Trump elected, actually, I think. That was a big thing where he was able to successfully make a lot of people believe that he was a victim because of a lot of stuff sort of like this. Not just the BBC, of course. This is just one of many examples where news kind of doctored his statements to make him look worse when that wasn't even necessary. He already looks bad. And he was able to actually use that as a defense for himself.
Trump threatened to sue the following day, prompting the broadcaster to issue an apology, describing the edit as, quote, an error of judgment.
See, exactly. Now, because of that edit, he was able to get a formal apology, which for some American voters, all they're seeing is like, it's taking their focus away from like the Capitol riot to like, oh, they tried to blame Trump and then they had to apologize for it. So Trump is innocent. Unfortunately, there's a lot of Americans who think in those terms, where it's like, if it was just presented on its face, obviously Donald Trump and his supporters are responsible for what happened on that day. So it's actually kind of unfortunate this happened.
But this did not satisfy Trump, who announced days later that he would sue the BBC for at least $1 billion.
My God.
In later court filings introduced in a Florida court, Trump and his lawyers demanded up to $10 billion in compensation. The BBC vowed to fight the case, arguing in their subsequent motion to dismiss that the court in question lacked jurisdiction because the documentary never aired in the US, and that Trump...
Oh! Well, there were U.S. news organizations who did the exact same thing. I know this. It's not just the BBC. And this particular example never even aired in the U.S. So the fact that he was trying to sue the BBC for $10 billion and like it was aired in Britain, right? Like not even to American voters.
Couldn't plausibly claim reputational harm from a film that was aired right before he won the 2024 election.
Oh man, that's another thing. If this is an ongoing court case where he's trying to prove that his reputation was damaged, hilarious concept, by the way, that Donald Trump's reputation is already so freaking bad. It couldn't be damaged anymore. He has no reputation. But anyway, somehow he's the president, and he was elected president, and so this documentary didn't end up influencing like his loss or anything. So there's not much to sue over.
This was a tense moment, to say the least, for British media, and raised the question, could news organisations face catastrophic reprisals for editorial mistakes when covering the US president?
Oh, I mean, if you're a credited news organization anywhere and you make an error, that should have consequences. I think there should be penalties and consequences. I don't like Donald Trump, but I still think the news needs to be very transparent and honest. So yeah, there should be consequences.
This is why for months people have been waiting on updates from the pre-trial hearings. So this week, many were surprised to see the tables turn on President Trump, who might end up losing more than the BBC does over this libel case. For those of you who aren't familiar with the workings of a court case, before a case goes to trial, hearings take place where parties discuss schedules, agree the facts of the case, and decide on what evidence can be shown at trial. Okay. That last part, where different pieces of evidence are put on the table, is called disclosure. And the claimant in a libel case can't just disclose the evidence that suits them. They're also obliged to disclose evidence that the defendant might want to use to make their case. This is where the shock came last Tuesday. US Magistrate Judge Angelique Lett upheld a subpoena from the BBC demanding that Trump divulge detailed financial information about all of his businesses. What was the BBC's justification? Well,
interesting. Wait a minute. The BBC is trying to force Donald Trump to divulge this personal financial information? I wouldn't mind that at all. I would love to see that. I mean, it should be common knowledge by now. Trump is the most corrupt president in American history. There's, as far as how much money he has made, about the way who he chooses to run our government, and businesses that he takes money from, everything about he has exploited his position as president more than any other president by far, and it's not even close. Literally the other week, he is selling access to his Truth Social posts. So his stupid social media website where he posts updates, the things he posts on there actually do affect the market. And he is selling premium access, so you get to see his posts before the public, which is the definition of collusion and corruption and giving power to the rich for who can afford. Whoever can afford to pay for his information gets it first, and then he posts it to the public. It's the most insane thing. And in the United States, that's not even that big of a news story. The BBC forcing him to disclose this financial information would be interesting, but I wouldn't be shocked by whatever I see.
When Trump filed the libel suit, he claimed damages on 2 grounds. The first was damage to his personal brand. The second was damage to his business empire. The BBC...
His personal brand. Donald Trump's personal image. Yeah. Wouldn't want to damage that.
The BBC argued that they needed to know about the ins and outs of all of his businesses to prove that he wasn't affected in the slightest by the Panorama documentary. Now, some of you might be thinking, don't we already know about Trump's businesses? Haven't I seen lots of reports about his crypto wealth, dodgy business deals, and licensing deals?
Another example of when he made Trump coin, the crypto coin, and pumped it up, worth billions, millions, billions of dollars, and then all of his friends sold it, and all the normal people who bought it thinking they'd get rich off of it lost everything. Like, there's just example after example that, like, Americans we forget about because it's every day, it's so often. We forget about all this stuff. It's outrageous.
After all, it was only a couple of weeks ago that Trump had to make his annual financial disclosure report to the US Office of Government Ethics, which detailed his financial holdings in stocks, bonds, and property, as well as information on income and gifts from non-governmental sources.
I mean, now it's just like we're living in a terrifying reality because he can do all this stuff and even disclose it, but he runs the United States government. He's the president. There's not going to be any accountability for him, even if he's caught doing something.
This is how we know that Trump made $2.2 billion in the first year of his second term, and did a suspicious amount of trading on the stock market. But this only scratches the surface, because most of Trump's investments, assets, and business interests are actually held in a revocable trust, the aptly named Donald J. Trump Revocable Trust, which is something of a black box. And this is what the Beeb wanted to know more about. In their subpoena, the BBC asked for the original agreement that created his trust, all assets and properties owned by it, and its tax returns. They also want granular detail on the individual businesses and assets within the trust. Over 400 Trump-linked business entities are subject to the subpoena.
Okay, I mean, I like this. Maybe this is a lot of information we don't have. And I like that it's coming from the BBC, an international or like entity. Because Donald Trump won't allow himself to be held accountable to an American entity or the American government because he runs all that. But this is British, so it's outside his jurisdiction, which I like.
The property companies, the crypto transactions, the licensing deals, the intellectual property. This is information that Trump has kept under wraps for years and would at least partially become public knowledge if released in court, for journalists, lawyers, and any of his opponents to scrutinize. Let allowed the BBC to subpoena dozens of members of Trump's inner circle, including his son, Donald Trump Jr., Steve Bannon, and Stephen Miller. It's a big moment. On Wednesday night,
yeah, BBC, I see ya. I like this.
Trump's lawyers filed an emergency motion asking to amend their initial lawsuit, only asking for damages related to Trump's personal reputation and not his business empire.
Wow. So now that the BBC is pushing back and, playing by the rules of law, requesting all this evidence, suddenly Donald Trump doesn't want to do the lawsuit anymore.
And asking Judge Lett to pause her disclosure order while the claim was amended. The BBC kept on the offensive though, asking the judge to ignore Trump's lawyers, who they say are trying yet again to avoid giving any meaningful information to support their claims against a documentary that never aired in the United States. But on Thursday, the court essentially sided with Trump and accepted the emergency stay requested by his lawyers. In practice, this means that Trump won't have to disclose details about his trust in the near future, and probably never if he decides to drop any claims about his business empire.
Wow. Of course. I mean, I suppose it was always going to be difficult to actually get Donald Trump to disclose something like this, that he's working so hard to keep secret. But that was close. That seemed like the best case scenario for the BBC to force this using his own lawsuit. Wow. And as soon as they tried, he just backed out of his own lawsuit or amended it to try to get out of this. Wow.
Nonetheless, even if this represents a temporary reprieve for Trump, in the grand scheme of things, this case doesn't seem to be going brilliantly for him. He can either continue to claim damages against his business empire, but risk being forced to disclose all of his financial secrets, or he can drop this claim and narrow the scope of the case to just alleged damages to his personal reputation. But this is obviously a more difficult thing to quantify, and it's hard to imagine any impartial court agreeing with the notion that a dodgy cut in a Panorama documentary that did not actually air in the US could have incurred $10 billion worth of damages to Trump's personal brand in the same jurisdiction.
I see. Because a part of me is trying to like be very, very objective about this. Is this lawsuit valid or not? On one hand, you shouldn't try to be deceptive if you are the news. I understand some news organizations have a spin, they give their opinion, and that's fine. But like when you're presenting the facts or what happened, this seemed to be a bit deceptive, and I don't like to defend Donald Trump at all, and I won't. But this was unnecessary to like edit those two things together. And so he says, we want to march down to the Capitol building. And then it like cuts to the next part. And it's like, and we are going to fight like hell to stop them, to save America or whatever, something like that. That's not good. Like you probably shouldn't do that. Now, did that cause $10 billion in damages to Donald Trump? No. And he became president, and honestly, there's a part of me that like doesn't even care, and like that the BBC did that, and kind of wishes that if the BBC was kind of like gonna make that edit and bend the rules a little bit, doing it against Donald Trump is the one time where I'd be like, you know what? Okay, that's if it would like stop him from being president, if we go back in time. Yeah, I'd be like, okay, you know what? Let's edit the whole thing. Let's make it sound like, let's cut it all up and edit the whole thing. Whatever it takes to not have had all this be the reality that we're living in. But unfortunately, that's not the case. So regardless, this was very interesting to learn about. I actually had no idea all of this was going on. I vaguely remember him hearing about Trump suing over being misrepresented with this whole situation. And it's actually interesting how this lawsuit almost got totally flipped on him. And it would have revealed like probably a lot of interesting things about Donald Trump's personal financial details, and probably a lot of corruption. Not that we need, like, at least me personally, needs more to, like, I already think pretty poorly of all that, but it'd probably still be good regardless. But, so, it unfortunately sounds like that's not happening if he's able to back out all this, but it's interesting to learn about. Like the BBC almost doing us all a favor here. So anyway, if you enjoyed this, feel free to give this video a like or leave a comment with your thoughts about all this, especially if you had heard about all this or you have thoughts about Trump and a lot of these things we talked about. That'd be interesting to hear about. And if you're interested in more videos like this, feel free to subscribe for more. And until then, thanks for watching, and see you next time.